Hey, what's up everyone? Night Batman with a review on Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. The reason I'm doing a review for both parts is because Part 2 will be coming out very soon and I managed to see it early, and Part 2 came out mid last year and I really enjoyed that as well, but I never got to review that. So I wanted to just do a quick review for both parts in one video. So first, to start off, if you have seen Part 1 or if you've even read the graphic novel and for some reason are unsure where the story fits in with the mainstream line, it's actually set in a different universe that Frank Miller, who wrote the book, calls it the Dark Knight universe. It consists of Batman Year 1, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, Batman The Dark Knight Strikes Again, and All-Star Batman and Robin, which all share one main storyline, but they aren't part of the main comics. And Batman Year 1 has actually been referred to a lot as Batman's main origin, so that's the one book that you can refer to between the mainstream line and the Dark Knight universe. So into the movie. Part 1 deals mainly with Batman's return. We see a lot of how bad Gotham's gotten since Bruce retired as Batman. Bruce retired after the second Robin, Jason Todd, was killed by the Joker. And so he's been inactive for 10 years, and Gotham has just been dealing with a lot of deaths and crimes rising with no end to it. And it eventually forces Bruce back into the costume, and it really is great to see him back as Batman. When he spends his first night out as Batman, it's something that was a lot darker than we've seen in a lot of animated movies that Batman's been in. It flows really well. It was where the movie really starts to pick up pace and almost felt like it was shorter than it really was. One of my favorite moments in the movie was when Batman leaps up into the air and there's lightning behind him, which was a very good homage to one graphic novel cover where Batman's also doing that same pose, and I thought it looked really great on screen. I also enjoyed how with Part 1 and Part 2 they took a lot of not just scenes from the book, like panel for panel, but they also took almost every exact line as well. I really enjoyed the pacing for Part 1 because of how it kept building and building from Bruce's inactive life as Batman to his big return, and how Gotham is kind of feeling some of those results. And I like how those results carried into Part 2, because Part 2 is more like a repercussion story about Batman's effects on not just Gotham but the world as well. We see how the president actually calls on Superman to fly in and get Batman to stop what he's doing, because it makes the government seem ineffective to what they should be doing. And I like how Part 2 has a lot of cameos of characters from outside the Batman comics, like against Superman. There's also Green Arrow, there's Selina Kyle. Well, of course she's part of the comics, but it was just great to see her. And you know, it was definitely Part 2 was bigger in scale in showing that Batman's return not only affected Gotham but pretty much the world. In I can't really reveal much on the story, but you have to check it out. The animation is really great. It follows the same, it tries to pay homage to the art style of the books, which was really great because it felt like you were seeing the book come to life in animated form. And it also reminded me of the Batman Year 1 animated film, which also paid homage again to the art style in the Batman Year 1 graphic novel. The voice acting was pretty good. Peter Weller as Batman was okay. It wasn't as memorable as Kevin Conroy and didn't immediately come off feeling like a Batman voice, but it eventually grew on me and I came to enjoy it every time I watched it. And in Part 2, when we hear Joker's voice, it didn't really stand out until the climactic scene with him and Batman in the fair. But when it came to that scene, it definitely felt like a Joker voice, and I wish that it had more of that impact earlier in the movie. Joker is actually more in Part 2 than in Part 1. He actually should have been a bit more in Part 1, but they pushed a lot of his scenes that were supposed to be in Part 1 into Part 2, which I thought matched pretty well because it made the story build up even more, and it kept part one's focus on Batman's return, and you know, keeping in theme with the repercussions of Batman's actions in part two. So I thought that was a smart move for them to do. The music by Christopher Drake in both part one and part two was just amazing. It's something that you would almost think came from the Dark Knight trilogy, compared to the music done by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard. And it had some good emotional weight, and it really carried the action immensely. It felt like the action wouldn't have been as good as it was without Christopher Drake's music, and he's done a lot of Batman animated movies, and this one really stood out, and I'm glad that he did his very best work for probably the two best Batman animated movies to date. Of course, since I really love the graphic novel, I can't say that I hated anything about both parts, since they were very faithful, and you know, they kept true to the ending and added a few little scenes in some parts, you know, like extended action scenes, which looked great, especially in part two, since part two was a lot more brutal and we saw a lot more blood than most Batman animated movies I've seen. And the fight scene between Superman and Batman was just off the hook. I mean, when you see that fight start out and eventually end, it makes you want to go back and see like just how long the fight was and what parts they took in. And they actually put in, the animated movie to put in a lot more than was in, and I'm glad that they came up with all those extra little moments that made the fight even more epic than it was in the book. And Superman, I really enjoyed in this part two. The one thing I just never liked about Frank Miller is how, you know, he kind of changed the characters in The Dark Knight Strikes Again, but this isn't a review on that. But if you ever do plan on reading it, you probably shouldn't, because in my opinion that book just was terrible, and I hope they don't do an animated movie for that. If you haven't seen part one, you should immediately check it out. Go rent it, go buy it. You're definitely gonna want to buy it even after you've rented it. Part two will be coming out later this month, and if you plan on buying it or renting it, just buy it. You're gonna enjoy it, and I am so happy that the story is now complete. The Dark Knight Returns was a great graphic novel, and now it's two great animated movies, and I plan on watching it again after this review. And pretty much that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed my review, and I hope I've persuaded you into seeing these two great animated movies. And until my next video, maybe, I guess, I hope you guys have a kick-ass day. Later.